couple of weeks ago, as I went through the comments made by some of CU Lounge's listeners and viewers, I came across an interesting comment that mentioned the struggle that sometimes us, music listeners, have when wanting to describe the music we love, parts of it, or just the vocals. I'll be honest, I have been reviewing music for over 10 years, and sometimes even I get stuck when wanting to review music and describe to you what is happening and what I am feeling during my very first clean listen of that single or album. How to put into words and make others understand what is happening when they have not listened to the release and are looking for insight on whether or not it is worth the purchase. Reviewing music is hard and takes quite a lot of time, especially if it is more technical analysis driven like I do, and less of going over the release as a whole and the feelings you get in comparison with other releases like most music reviewing outlets do. Not to say that one way or the other are wrong, actually both are valid ways to review music, but since I have music production and mixing experience, I tend to review music with a massive focus on the production side, more so than on lyrics and such. Other reviewers, since they are journalists, review music on a different level, being pretty good in describing feelings rather than the instruments and compositions. Now, what I used to struggle a lot with, more than describing instruments, were the vocals. At times, when a CU with a unique voice tone or register appears, I face the same struggle. Vocals are tricky to describe, am I right? How to describe when a voice wobbles a bit, how to describe when the performance is too breathy, how to pinpoint what type of voice a certain CU has. Voice types and vocal register are especially tricky to pinpoint, especially because as a singer, you may have a certain register, but while speaking, you have a completely different tone, one that doesn't match that register. Things get a bit complicated as soon as you start wanting to describe voices. So you may have voice actors that, for example, have a rather deep speaking voice tone, but when singing, they are hitting high notes and struggle with the low ones. What are they? Baritones? Tenors? Faux baritones? In this episode of CU Lounge, you'll learn the basic voice types and voice tones, all to better understand the strengths and capabilities of your favorite CU's voice and how to spot certain types of voices. Let's kick off this episode of CU Lounge. Welcome to CU Lounge, I am your host Vanessa and today's topic is voice types and vocal tones all applied to CU. This is a really technical topic that I am pretty excited to talk about. A disclaimer though, I am no vocal coach and I have no singing experience, therefore everything that I will be talking about is a mix of my experience as a music reviewer and a lot of research on the topic. If there are any imprecisions in this episode, don't hesitate to hit me up in the comments on YouTube or send in a voice message through Anchor. At the same time, and due to copyright restrictions, I can't show you examples of any voices nor songs, so I will leave suggestions throughout the episode for you to check what I've talked about and come to your own conclusions. Links to some songs will be in the description. First off, let's go over some terms so that you aren't confused during this episode. A note that I won't be too technical as to start talking about vocal folds and chords because I would be making stuff up. That's something that I leave for specialists and I link you to some interesting articles on the topic in this episode's description box, so make sure to check those out if you're curious. Now let's go over those terms and make things a bit clearer for you. A voice or vocal tone is different from a vocal register. For purposes of this episode, I will be using the words voice tone instead of the proper, scholarly way of saying, which is vocal tone. Voice tone refers to the special quality or color a voice has, regardless of its pitch. Examples of voice tones include breathy, rich, nasally, dark, whispery, alluring, husky, and many more. For example, Tetsuya Kakihara has a breathy voice tone even when singing. Hikaru Midorikawa has a nasally voice tone. Ryohei Kimura has a husky voice, and so on and so forth. Think about the seiyuu you love and the music they sing. When you didn't know about them and first came across them, I bet that it was the voice tone that grabbed your attention. It is said that even when there are several singers sharing the same vocal register for you to choose from, the voice tone is the deciding factor that makes a person like one singer more than the other. Same applies to seiyuu voices. For example, I enjoy tenors because of their versatility, but if a tenor has a way too bright and peppy tone, I don't like it at all. But if the tenor has a more robust, breathy tone, for example, I will almost instantly enjoy their voice. If you are familiar with my reviews at The Hand That Feeds HQ, I often describe voice tones with a lot of adjectives. Those refer to the voice tone. In simple terms, a voice tone is how a voice sounds to you, the listener. On the other way, vocal register refers to the 6 types of voices that describe people's singing range. Those are soprano, mezzo-soprano, contralto, tenor, baritone, and bass. I will talk about those in a bit, but note that soprano, mezzo-soprano, and contralto are female voices, and tenor, baritone, and bass are male voices. What is falsetto? Falsetto is a way of singing that sounds breathy and hollow, and you can find it in the upper vocal range of male singers. I note that female singers can also go for falsetto, but it's not common. For example, in Soma Saito's Lemming Eye Obelisk in Quantum Stranger, the chorus is completely sung in falsetto, much in the style of Maroon 5's Adam Levine. Also, in Error, song from the album Horizon, Yuma Uchida performs part of the pre-chorus and chorus in falsetto. What is head voice? Usually, people can't tell apart head voice from falsetto. In both, the singer is tackling high notes in their vocal register, but what changes between both is how rich and balanced head voice is in comparison with falsetto. Falsetto is breathy, head voice isn't. Head voice is really tricky to master and few are the singers to do so. Among male seiyuu, Kisho and Toshiyuki Toyonaga are masters at head voice, although both also like to mix it up falsetto in their performances. An example of a song in which Kisho showcases his head voice is in Gran Rodeo's Odyssey Sono Nantonaku o Shiri Nagara from MS Cowboy no Gyakushu. Toshiyuki Toyonaga shows how consistent and powerful head voice is in Kitten, song from his first album, Music of the Entertainment. Just listen to his performance in the first chorus in that song and pay special attention around the 3:30 mark. Note how his high notes in the chorus don't sound breathy. That is head voice. He does the same in Yume no Meto, song from the same album. Among male seiyuu, Toyonaga is the most consistent and complete head voice singer. What is vibrato? Vibrato is a rapid, slight variation in the pitch or note you're singing, marked by a quick wavering in the intensity, which is the volume, and timbre, which is the tone of the note that is being sung. No one is born with vibrato. That is one thing that you must be aware. Vibrato can be natural in the sense that you have balance in your vocals even if you haven't trained to have it, or learned, which consists in the singer finding that balance through practice to achieve vibrato. Inexperienced singers and singers with poor technique do not have vibrato or have a really wobbly vibrato instead of the full, robust version. Makoto Furukawa is well known for his natural, powerful vibrato. Check his performance in Dokeshito Sadness in his single Chizuganakute mo Modoru Kara. That is paradise for those that enjoy vibrato. The endings of his words are almost all accented with vibrato. An interesting note: Furukawa actually mentioned that he has little control over his vibrato output and sometimes he wishes he had a clearer voice instead of it. Furukawa has, weirdly enough, the most robust vibrato among seiyuu. In comparison, for example, Kenji Nojima has an insane vibrato, but his control and intensity are pretty inconsistent. Now that we have the basics to describe voices and understand music reviews, let's go over the standard vocal types in Western music. Those are soprano, mezzo-soprano, contralto, tenor, baritone, and bass. Female singers can have a soprano, mezzo-soprano, or contralto voice type. Male singers can have a tenor, baritone, or bass voice type. I won't go over detail on female singers as I don't review music by female singers, and I don't make a custom of listening to music performed by female singers. However, I will go over detail on male voice types. The most common voice type for men is baritone. A baritone is a singer with a deep, rich voice. It is the middle range voice type for males and lies between the bass and tenor ranges, overlapping both of them. Some say that baritones are the most versatile singers, others say that baritones are actually the less versatile as they can't hit very low notes like a bass can, or very high notes like a tenor can. It really depends on the training that a baritone has, and each singer with a baritone voice type is unique. There are baritones with a lot of control that can tap into a high register with confidence, whereas there are others that can tap into the lower register and go for those awesome bass notes. A good example of a baritone with a massive range both for low and high notes is Tatsuhisa Suzuki. Other examples of baritones among male seiyuu include Daisuke Ono, Tarusuke Shingaki, Shunsuke Takeuchi, Takuya Sato, Makoto Furukawa, Shotaro Morikubo, Shinichiro Kamyu, and Junichi Suabe. A tenor is the highest male voice within the modal register. It is one of the rarest voice types among men. A tenor has a boyish, high pitch associated, which is a rarer quality in mature men than the baritone and bass pitched voices. Just like baritones, versatility differs from tenor to tenor, and there are no two tenors that sound the same or share the exact same range. Examples of tenors among male seiyuu include Soma Saito, Yoshiki Nakajima, Yuma Uchida, Toshiyuki Toyonaga, Natsuki Hanae, and Shota Oi. A note that most of the talents signed to 81 Produce are tenors. Bass is the lowest singing voice for men. Bass is, just like tenor, less common among men in comparison to baritone. A singer with the bass voice can deliver incredibly deep tones. True bass singers are a rarity. Therefore, there is a gray zone between baritones with a good bass register and bass singers. Examples of bass voice types among male seiyuu include Hinata Tadokoro and Hiroki Yasumoto. I have my reservations about Hinata Tadokoro since we don't have many examples of his singing range, aside from Infinito Zero, in which he is a baritone with a really low register, or a bass with a high range. I can't really say with precision which type of singer he is, but I am including him in the bass section as he has, at times, performed like one, and he does so with comfort, something that, in comparison, Shunsuke Takeuchi, that is a baritone, can't pull off without breaking out of the note to a more comfortable one, or gasping for air due to lacking technique needed to pull off a bass voice. There are some seiyuu like Takuya Guchi in Solids, Tomoaki Maino in Quartet Night, and Shunsuke Takeuchi in Quell that are known for singing in a rather deep way, but they are actually just really good at sounding like bass voice type of singers. They are in fact talented baritones with vocal ranges that cover a part of the bass register. Now we have the oddball. The four baritones. If you are familiar with Visual Kei music, you're well aware of this vocal technique that makes one with a tenor voice reach that coveted deep, robust and low singing tone of a baritone and sometimes bass voice type of singer. Gact, Kamijo and many others in Visual Kei are known for being four baritones. They are skillful at that, but actually their natural singing tone is a bit, if not a lot higher than that. They are tenors at their core. Full baritone is more like a technique to achieve a voice type that you don't have than it is a natural voice type. Among male seiyuu, Soma Saito is known for that, having, as part of the Visual Kei band Medicode, went full-on full baritone, delivering performances in which his tenor voice tone is nowhere to be found, and his clear voice tone is unrecognizable. As an example, check Medicode's Rosa from the band's single, Gabi. Saito's voice is lower than usual and dense, something that you usually don't associate to his clear tenor voice. It is also with a whole lot of vibrato going, which is unusual for him as well. Now go back to Saito's Lemming Eye Obelisk and compare his vocal register in both songs. It is quite the shocking change, but he does have really good control over his vocals and has a wide vocal range and technique that enable him to have these dramatic changes of tone when singing, transforming into a completely different singer for different projects. There are other seiyuu that have dabbled into four baritone territory, but few have showcased the power and consistency that he has, which is commendable taking into account that he is a tenor with quite the high range. A note that these voice types are merely guidelines. Vocal coaches and experts agree that there are many variations within each voice type, and it is difficult to pinpoint where one voice type begins and another ends, giving way to those gray areas like Hinata Tadokoro or even Wataru Hatano's cases. Also, within each voice type, there are singers that have nuanced versions of that type. So you also can't say, for example, that one person sounds more baritone than the other. Both are baritones, covering slightly different ranges, but all within what a baritone usually covers. A big misconception that there is out there is that if a seiyuu has a deep voice when talking, certainly they have a bass type of voice. That is further from the truth as it can get. They can be a baritone with a good bass range, for example. Also note that having a deep speaking voice not always translates into a lower singing range, or having a high speaking voice doesn't mean that the Seiyu in question is a tenor. Voice is a really complex thing to describe, and there are a lot of gray areas that you need to have into attention. Getting to know more about voices, the tones, and register might sound like a complicated thing, and it is at times, but once you have the hang of it, each of these things you've just learned will be easy to spot. My advice is for you to train your ears. Listen to music regularly using headphones and pay attention to the singing tones, registers, and techniques used. You'll start to notice those things you've just learned the more you are exposed to more music and different types of singers. After this episode, and counting with episodes 14 and 15, you now have the basis to talk about music in a more critical way, a bit similar to how I conduct my reviews at The Hand That Feeds HQ. I hope you now can, with some comfort, describe what you like in your favorite songs, what parts stand out to you in a performance, especially voice quality, tone, and register wise. Now, to practice all you've just learned in this episode. If you had to describe your favorite Seiyu's voice, what is his voice tone like? Also, what is his voice type? Is he a tenor, a baritone, or a bass? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this episode and don't want to miss The Hand That Feeds HQ's weekly male Seiyu and music-related content, hit the subscribe button. I'll return next week with another episode of Seiyu Lounge. Thank you for listening, and see you guys around.